Long time no see, citizens of Nintendo City. I know you've been waiting more than 3 months for a video from this channel, and I apologize for not delivering until now. Life took a bit of a crazy turn in November, leaving me both physically and mentally exhausted, but I won't bore you with the details. Add the typical wave of big Nintendo games that land towards the end of the year, and my time and energy to work on YouTube disappeared.
Nah, you're just lazy. I saw you on TikTok.
Okay, fine, I'm lazy. Do you know how much less effort it is posting past video clips in TikTok versus creating an entirely new video? Unfortunately, my kind of cringe humor is not what the cool kids on TikTok are looking for, so here I am. In all seriousness, I'm incredibly excited to talk about my top 6 Nintendo games of 2021. I remember going into 2021 thinking the year had the potential to match up with 2017, the Switch's first and greatest year. But in hindsight, it's clear that I was fooling myself, as development on many projects were understandably hampered by the 2020 pandemic, delaying some big titles past 2021. However, despite being on the tail end of a pandemic, there were a fair amount of major Switch games to play throughout the year. In fact, I think I played more new releases this year than in 2020, although I'm sure I spent more time playing in total last year than this year. You know, living that quarantine life. This year, I took the opportunity to try series that I don't normally play, stepping out of my comfort zone to experience unique ideas and challenge myself. So, indie games? Yeah, basically, but some AAA titles too. Doesn't mean I enjoyed them all, but I feel as though I have a better understanding of my tastes, what I value in video games. Without further ado, here are my top 6 games of 2021. Also, please excuse my nasally-ness. I think I have a little bit of a stuffed nose. It's that time of year. Nintendo seems to be on a mission to make the Wii U more and more obsolete with every new Wii U port, as if pretending that their failure predecessor to the Switch was nothing more than a terrible nightmare. My heart goes to the Wii U stands who believed in that little system, all 20 of them. Hey, at least you still have access to a better virtual console selection, for now. The latest nail in the Wii U's coffin, however, was a little different from your typical port. Instead of more or less copy-pasting Super Mario 3D World like they have done with other Wii U titles, Nintendo decided to include a brand new gameplay expansion to spice up the deal, Bowser's Fury. Now, don't get me wrong, Super Mario 3D World is an excellent game. Fantastic design, fun power-ups, creative levels, great co-op, Rosalina. What a simp. It feels good to be back simping again. But it was the side campaign that impressed me this year. Even though I consider myself an amateur when it comes to platforming games, I still love Mario games. The nearly perfect game design keeps even a mediocre player like myself entertained for hours. 2D, 3D, 2.5D, linear, sandbox, whatever this is, I'm usually there day one, most likely getting my butt kicked, but I'm having a good time. However, if I had to choose which I prefer, it would be the 3D sandbox type of gameplay you find in Odyssey and Mario Sunshine. And that's what Bowser's Fury offers, except with 3D world mechanics. Traditionally, Mario games separate their levels and worlds from the next, either by a map or a list of some sort. But in the case of Bowser's Fury, levels are located in one congruent world. No transitions between areas or visible loading screens. Just one grand fluid area, only separated by water. To be fair, the water does act as a transition between the areas, but it's a creative way of giving Bowser's Fury the illusion of a completely open world. Of course, it's not just the free-roaming nature of the campaign that makes it special. The platforming and level designs are genuinely fantastic, either introducing new mechanics or improving on existing series staples. Part of the fun is running around the world discovering those levels, solving the challenges in what you believe to be the best way. It adds a Mario Odyssey level of freedom to the typical 2D style level design. The levels also increase in difficulty and complexity the further you explore and the more cat sprites you collect. In that way, it balances the appeal for both first-time Mario players and seasoned veterans alike. If you want to quickly finish the campaign, you're more than welcome to, but you miss out on some of the more challenging puzzles the expansion has towards the end. Not gonna lie, the final few shines had me swearing like an angry Italian plumber at times. Mamma mia! Mamma mia! But I did eventually collect them all. Although I feel like there's something I'm missing, like a big feature in Bowser's Fury, something to do with the gameplay. Maybe even the biggest selling point of the game. What was it? Oh yeah,
God Slayer Bowser!
Actually, the real name is Fury Bowser. Why do you gotta ruin everything, huh? Fine. Fury Bowser, formerly known as Godslayer Bowser, is the main boss of the campaign, who spawns every 15 minutes or so to cause utter chaos. Normally, Mario is helpless in the presence of Kaiju Bowser, so the most the player can do is run for your life! As you're making like a tree, you can use Bowser's Hyper Beam Blast to unlock new cat shines behind normally unbreakable blocks. I really like this mechanic as it gives a risk and reward behind Fury Bowser's frequent attacks. So whenever Gogeta respawns, you can create a plan to destroy the blocks in that area. Just be careful not to get disintegrated yourself. While Fury Bowser is normally an unstoppable force of nature, don't think the plumber is unable to defend himself. Gathering enough cat shines gives Mario access to a kaiju-sized power-up. By the power of the Gigabell, I have the power! Super Saiyan God Cat Mario, go! Actually, his name is Giga Cat Mario.
Let me have this!
With the Gigabell power-up, Mario is able to take Fury Bowser head-on. It's the biggest fight in Mario history, albeit not the most exciting. While not boring, the fights with Bowser are fairly generic. Not bad, but not incredibly special either, until the final boss segment, that is. At least the idea of having a kaiju battle is pretty fun. And finally, kicking Fury Bowser to the curb after all his chaos is satisfying. The thematic setting of Bowser's Fury's world is certainly unique. While Lake Lapcat gives off a tropical island adventure vibe, most of the enemies, buildings, and landscapes are themed after cats. Ironic considering cats stereotypically hate water. Even Mario's kaiju form is just a Super Saiyan kitty. But why? Why the cats? Was it only to connect the expansion to 3D World? I guess in typical Mario fashion, Nintendo does what they want in terms of aesthetics, no matter how random. While it's not a consistent and harmonious theme, I can't say I didn't like it. Look! They have accepted me as one of their own! Graphically speaking, it's definitely one of the most pleasing Switch games to look at. Sometimes. There are minor performance issues here and there, but nothing that affected my playtime negatively. That said, the world Lake Lapcat is not heavy in terms of details and assets, so the frame rate really shouldn't be an issue. This isn't Breath of the Wild or Super Mario Odyssey here, but again, it didn't mess with the gameplay or take away from my enjoyment. Bowser's Fury is a fun, MIDI 3D Mario adventure with an open world design that could become the blueprint for future games, even beyond Odyssey. When coupled with 3D Land, Bowser's Fury is easily one of the best games by Nintendo this year.
This is for my fellow hunters! Let's go!
Monster Hunter is one gaming series you see so many people enjoy, and yet you can't get into yourself. I remember hearing about its popularity in Japan and how friend groups would spend hours together hunting monsters. Naturally, because of that, I wanted to try it myself, see what all the hype was about. I picked up Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate for the 3DS, but I couldn't feel that hype. Picked up Generation, never clicked. Granted, I didn't invest hundreds of hours into the series, but it was enough to know that something wasn't clicking. Hunting famed HP sponges was more so tedious than fun, so I eventually put it down. But at the same time, I would look over and see people online recount elegant tales of their latest hunts, showing off their shiny armors and weapons and gush about their favorite monsters. What was I missing? Was I playing the game wrong? How could I obtain such happiness? I want to be a hunter too. If you couldn't tell, I'm very melodramatic. When Rise was officially revealed, I vowed to myself that I would give the series one more shot, praying that somehow it would finally click for me. As you can see, it clicked, landing at number 5 on my Game of the Year list. Although I'm not spending every waking minute or even every weekend hunting for monsters like some hardcore fans. My hours playing Monster Hunter are embarrassing in comparison. Still, getting through the main credits and playing online from time to time is a huge improvement from my 3DS days, and proof that I'm finally enjoying myself. But what changed between last time I tried and now? Honestly, friendship. Yeah, all you need is friendship. Diving into Monster Hunter for the first time is not as straightforward as you might think. There are a surprising amount of moving parts to the series, which can easily overwhelm a beginner with tutorial after tutorial. Rise, however, eases up a smidge on the necessary micromanaging, creating a more accessible beginning. It also includes 2 NPC companions, the equally adorable Palico and Palamute, to aid in your quest while playing by yourself or online, either offering offensive firepower or defensive support. These additions made my beginning all the more smoother and enjoyable as I dove deeper into the game. That said, I still recommend finding a coach to show you the ropes and help you figure out the basics, whether a friend or some random YouTuber. Having that crutch makes a world of difference as you master the gameplay. Of course, I might be an idiot. In fact, it's highly likely, but I'm not sure if I would have kept going without friends supporting me along the way. Is it a shame the barrier to entry seems high? Maybe, but Monster Hunter is all about relying on others to complete the hunt. It's a community game. In that way of thinking, it's smart design to have the players teach beginners how to properly play the game. At least that's what I'm telling myself. Once you get past that initial stumbling block, Rise becomes an addictive adventure, packed with lifelike monsters, a vast collection of armor and weapon styles, beautiful scenery, and a surprisingly unique setting. As the name suggests, Monster Hunter's main goal is to hunt monsters. Find them, attack them, weaken them, and carve them. Or trap them if you want to be humane. Sympathy is a weakness. Okay, Mr. Edgelord, okay, we get it. The more monster parts and material you collect, the more weapons and armor you can forge, preparing you for bigger, badder monsters. This cycle continues until you're too OP, and have to wait for Capcom to release a new Apex Monster Quest just to feel the thrill of the fight again. Or so I'm told. Personally, I never got that OP. What I love about the monsters in Rise and in the series in general is how real they feel. All of these giant beasts have some sort of fantasy element to them, but their behavior and design is as though Mother Nature herself spit them out. Take the powerfully elegant Mizusune. While it very much looks like a mythical leviathan, its head and tail resembles a fox, the body and limbs dinosaur-like, and the webbed membrane on its face and back remind me of an axolotl. Kinda. Sorta. And while giant magical bubbles aren't something you'd find in nature, except maybe Florida or Australia, Mizusune's movements are so fluid and natural, just like a wild animal. This natural feel is a testament to the developers' understanding of animal movements and anatomy. Honestly, I am in awe of the Mizusune's majesty. It's so beautiful. Too bad I gotta kill it. Hey, I don't make the rules. You want a pacifist run? Go play Monster Hunter Stories 2. All of these compliments can be made for the other monsters as well. Well, maybe not the beautiful comment.
Some monsters are straight up ugly.
But so much thought is put into each one that adds further depth to the creatures you hunt, either because of their looks or attack patterns. Monster Hunter Rise also gets bonus points in my book for the gorgeous Japanese aesthetic. Everything from the hub village Kamura and its charming villagers to the monsters themselves, borrowing from Japanese mythology. The design choice sets Rise apart from the rest of the series, which usually takes inspiration from European lore and high fantasy, although I'm sure there are plenty of exceptions. Regardless, I think it's surprising that it took Capcom so long to bring in the Japanese influence, because it works so well. They nailed it. Of course we want to play in a Japanese-inspired environment. Your history and mythology is cool, Japan. Don't ever think it's not. Something they don't nail, unfortunately, is Rise's plot. Not to say it's terrible, but don't go into any Monster Hunter game expecting a grand narrative. Rise certainly tries though, including many of the NPC villagers and the village itself in story-significant moments. The problem is, there just isn't much character growth or storytelling involved, which is fair since Monster Hunter is more about the hunt and the gameplay rather than any sort of narrative. But I think Capcom is missing out on building a grand adventure with the Monster Hunter world and gameplay. And no, Monster Hunter Stories doesn't count. I'm sorry. That said, I did really enjoy the ending, or I guess I should say the multiple endings. It was very epic. It's just leading up to that point is a little basic. Not just a little, it is basic. But that's okay. I understand the point of the game. I haven't even mentioned the Rampage yet, Rise's equivalent to Monster Horde battles. Easily the most intimidating quest at first. The thought of taking on waves of powerful monsters when I struggle fighting just one filled me with all kinds of anxiety leading up to release. But thankfully, hunters are given a serious boost in stats and firepower, so the fight is much fairer. If you have a trustworthy hunting party, you should be able to handle the Rampage just fine. Actually, I grew to really enjoy this new way of fighting, as it offered a nice break from the usual hunting quests, blasting away with the various artillery, using the environment to trap and stun incoming hordes, getting on the ground and taking care of the monster yourself. It's a lot of fun, as long as things don't go south. Again, I can't emphasize enough, your team will make or break your defense. There is so much more I could talk about, but in interest of time, I'll end it here. Monster Hunter Rise is without a doubt the best game I've played in the series, with great additions to gameplay that could easily become series staples. I've heard some people complaining about the lack of post-game content, but I disagree. The Monster Hunter team has provided plenty of fun and challenging quests for hunters to sink their teeth into, especially for a newbie like myself. If you have been hesitant to try this series, pick up Rise, grab a friend or a Monster Hunter YouTube channel,
and enjoy the hunt.
Also, Rise has Ninoe and Minoto, who are both nominated for Best Waifus of 2021. Let's hear it for them! You really thought I'd go through a Monster Hunter Rise review without mentioning them? Come on.
少年、死にたくなければ手を取れ。
Those familiar with my channel will know that I'm a pretty big fan of Persona 5. Wow, 1 or 2 seconds into this Shin Megami Tensei 5 review and you already mentioned Persona 5. It's gotta be a new record. You sicken me. I can already tell this is gonna be a terrible review. No, wait. There's a point to it, just hear me out. The gameplay design, story, cast, and overall vibe of Persona 5 combined together to create an incredible JRPG that fans still talk about to this day, including myself. It's no wonder some people base their entire personality around Persona 5. You know who you are.
Whoa, that joke had some real Persona 5 vibes.
No, stop. Embarrassingly, I never played the parent series Shin Megami Tensei, despite knowing of it and pretending like I understood it. Gaming pride is a funny thing. You can't let people know what you don't know. Persona 5 was literally my first dip into the series and its iconic demons, which to some hardcore fans might be a punishable offense, or at least worth the cold shoulder. So in the interest of self-cultivation, I decided to try out the latest game in the Shin Megami Tensei series, Tokyo Mirage Session Sharp FE, which made it to my Game of the Year video last year. Check out that video if you want to hear more of my thoughts. In short, I really enjoyed it, but I also understood that I wasn't getting the full Shin Megami Tensei experience. Thankfully, the long-awaited 5th entry in the parent series finally released towards the end of 2021, giving me the perfect opportunity to correct my uncultured ways. The verdict? I could definitely see why the series has a dedicated fanbase. Immediately upon starting the game and getting past the opening exposition, it's clear that Shin Megami Tensei 5 is a lot more focused on the gameplay rather than the narrative and cast. While there is indeed a story to be told, the plot acts as nothing more than an excuse to battle grand and terrifying demons, going from point A to point B. Isn't that what all games, especially JRPGs, are like? Yes, but other games do a much better job of hiding it. In the beginning, the player character finds himself transported to an apocalyptic version of Tokyo, and upon fusing with a demon, becomes a Nahobino, a being with the power, glory, and majesty of deity. But instead of enjoying his newfound life as a hot fashion god, he decides to not skip out on his education and searches for a way home, recruiting demons and making some enemies along the way. And that's the extent of the story, more or less. Other things happen, but it's pretty bare bones as far as JRPGs go. In a way, Shin Megami Tensei 5 is more comparable to the Pokemon series than, say, most other JRPGs. That's right, I said it, Pokemon. Both are monster-capturing RPGs, both use monsters as party members instead of a typical cast of characters, both feature a vast lineup of monsters for the player to capture, both place heavier emphasis on combat gameplay than the story that is being told. Of course, there are plenty of ways the series differ, but understanding where the game places its emphasis helps set your expectations for the rest of the adventure. The game is not necessarily about telling a grand adventure, it's about the fights, the demons, the gameplay. It wasn't until I figured that out that Shin Megami Tensei 5 and its combat system truly began to click for me. Combat features a turn-based system where the player is given 4 actions per turn based on your party members, 1 action for each member. However, in typical Shin Megami Tensei fashion, by hitting an enemy's weakness or landing a critical hit, you earn an extra action with the potential to act 8 times, if you play your cards right. Effectively using this system will make or break tougher battles, because you can be sure as He-Ho that your enemies will attack in the most gruesome way possible. Occasionally the enemy AI decides to be merciful, but more often than not, these little demons will go out of their way to kill you.
I mean, what do you expect? The demons.
In my experience, striking first and hard usually results in the best outcome, as long as you don't miss. However, sometimes demons will catch you off guard and be the first to attack. In moments like those, all you can do is hold your breath and pray. Pray they don't crit or hit a party member's weakness, but unfortunately they usually do. And if you're really unlucky, they force a game over. Luckily for me in this instance, I saved right before this fight.
2 hours ago.
That's the thing with Shin Megami Tensei 5. The difficulty, in part, comes from the lack of an automatic saving system. A failure to save could end up costing you hours of your hard work. A lesson I learned the hard way. You think I would have learned that already from all my years playing video games, but apparently I needed some cram school studying. returning frequently to save points is a way around that inconvenience. However, you never really know if a typical enemy encounter will be your next meeting with the game over screen. That difficulty and brutality is what the series prides itself in. I only played in normal mode, but I can't tell you how many times the demons shanked me in the beginning. Granted, once I got a feel for the gameplay and understood everything wants to kill me, death became much less frequent. In fact, I surprisingly enjoyed the high level of difficulty. Yes, in the moment of dying it's frustrating, but coming out victorious after a particularly grueling battle is gratifying, especially when it's a boss battle. What's not so satisfying is attempting to recruit monsters. As people who watch my Persona 5 streams know, I am terrible at getting demons to join my side. Absolutely terrible. Maybe I have no conversation skills, because I seem to always say the wrong things. In Shin Megami Tensei 5's case, saying the wrong thing can easily end in death. At least attempting small talk in the real world doesn't cause me physical pain. Even if you manage to escape through their conversation minefield, most demons demand gifts before they agree to join you. We're not talking a little carrot or some insignificant collectible. They want money. Cold, hard cash before joining. And even then, you might accidentally tick them off if you say no. Struggling through that recruiting process allows you to eventually fuse your demon allies into stronger demons, which then you fuse into stronger demons, that you fuse to even stronger demons, and the cycle continues until you beat the game. Most of the demons you can probably find in the overworld, but some can only be summoned through fusion, with the more powerful demons, called special fusions, becoming accessible after completing certain quests. The gains far outweigh the price for these powerful demons, so I highly recommend investing time completing side quests and collecting demons when able so that you can summon these powerful monsters. Personally, my favorite is the cute and precious Idun, a goddess from Norse mythology. Fantastic healer with some light magic. They kinda went with a Little Red Riding Hood meets Japanese pop idol design, and for whatever reason, it works really well. She's super cute. She also happens to be the keeper of the golden apples, the source of youth for the Norse gods. Wait, apples? Goddess? The goddess of apple pie? Glory be to the name Idun! From here on out I vow my allegiance to the cute goddess Idun! May her apple pie last eternity! I wonder if it's too late to reserve my spot in Valhalla. In between combat, you'll explore the post-apocalyptic world of Dot, formerly known as Tokyo, searching for hidden items and Mimon, this game's equivalent of Korok seeds, albeit much more forgiving. The free-roaming exploration was not an aspect of the game I expected to enjoy, but knowing my love for the Xenoblade series, maybe it shouldn't be surprising. I enjoyed traversing Dot and admiring the layout of the created world. There wasn't always a secret hidden in every corner, but simply creating a world that is fun to roam after you battle is really all you need. That said, the aesthetic vision for Dot does get a bit tiresome after a while. Unlike some free-roaming games, Shin Megami Tensei 5 doesn't do much to switch up the environment, which can get a bit bland after a few hours. There's only so much sand I can take before my inner Anakin starts acting up, okay? Sand! Still, there were a few moments, especially later in the game, where the scenery impressed me with its color and design. For a Switch game, it is quite visually appealing. If you are looking for a challenging JRPG that incorporates modern turn-based combat and monster collection with Xenoblade-like exploration, then I highly recommend Shin Megami Tensei 5. Just be prepared for a trippy plot and cast members who don't really do anything. As for which series I prefer, Shin Megami Tensei or Persona, since you're dying to know. No, not really. I honestly think the combat in Shin Megami Tensei is better, more fun, at least in 5. But I'll take Persona's story, cast, music, and overall vibe any day.
Whoa. This reminds me of that one time in Persona 5.
Don't say it! It's hard to believe Gnosia came out in 2021. It feels so long ago that I took my first loop in space that I can hardly remember the game. I actually did a review for the game because I was so impressed and had some free time. So feel free to check that out if you want a more in-depth review. Here, however, I'll just give some brief thoughts. Actually, let me go rewatch that review real quick. Gnosia is not your typical visual novel. In fact, it's probably not accurate to call it such. More like a social deduction RPG, as the dev team likes to call it. Instead of reading a story and progressing with a single click of a button, successfully completing a loop in Gnosia requires the player to strategically interact with the NPC cast in order to win. That can involve either lying, pressing, gathering clues, shooting the breeze, whatever helps you win. Just pressing A is not going to get you very far. Think of it like Among Us story mode, a crew trapped in space with an imposter or imposters hiding among them. You play as either an innocent crew member or a malicious killer known as Gnosia, hence the name of the game. Instead of doing chores, the crew gets right down to the nitty-gritty interrogation, throwing accusations left and right until something sticks. It's up to you to somehow curve that discussion to your advantage, either to save the ship or rule the universe. The catch, at the end of each playthrough, whether you make it to the end or they put you on ice, the cycle restarts, placing you in a different scenario with potentially new outcomes. There are a plethora of unique interactions and story events that can occur during a playthrough, as long as certain requirements are met. To reach the endgame, you must eventually see most, if not all, those events, requiring close to 100 loops. Admittedly, some of the loops can get a little repetitive, since after a while you've seen all the standard dialogue, but it's worth it to unlock those special interactions. Thankfully, you are not at the complete mercy of RNG, as the game provides a match randomizer that automatically searches for new scenarios, smoothing out an otherwise daunting task. The cast is wonderfully charming and quirky, carrying with them their own distinctive otherworldly backgrounds. Part of the time-repeating adventure is figuring out who these people are and in what way they need help. You're bound to find one or two you resonate strongly with, either because of their personality or heart-tugging backstory. I love Gnosia, and I hope more people give this unique indie title a chance. I can't wait to see what the team behind Gnosia creates next, and certainly wouldn't mind a sequel featuring some slightly tweaked gameplay. If you're willing to experiment with a new kind of RPG, or love Among Us type gameplay, I highly recommend Gnosia.
Herlock Sholmes. You must have heard of me.
We must solve this case, Naruhodo-san.
Let us engage in the art of
Not only did you put an indie visual novel above Monster Hunter and Shin Megami Tensei, you placed another visual novel as the second best game of the year. Have you no shame? Look, I'll be the first to admit I place great value into a narrative. Games without much of a story tend not to make it on this list, while games with a lot of story focus can take up the top spots. My heavy plot bias is real. I admit that. However, I do also consider the gameplay as well, specifically how the gameplay immerses me into the story. If the story is great, but the gaming part is lacking, I typically lose interest in the game. Not to say visual novels can't be the exception to the rule, but I do expect some player interaction beyond turning a page when playing a video game. For me, the Ace Attorney series accomplishes that heavy visual novel narrative with just enough gameplay immersion to make for a wonderfully unique gaming experience. The latest entry in the franchise, The Great Ace Attorney Chronicles, is a testament to that excellent execution, combining puzzle solving with an epic murder mystery. A collection of 2 games, Great Ace Attorney Chronicles is an Ace Attorney meets Sherlock Holmes hybrid, mixing the series' classic courtroom antics with theatrical deductive reasoning. It's a concept that sounds pretty good on paper, but could easily falter with its execution. Thankfully, Capcom nailed the crossover, creating a breathtaking mystery, lovable cast, head-scratching puzzles towards the end, and a thrilling, unforgettable ending. The story takes place 100 or 200 years before my boy Phoenix Wright first steps into the courtroom, following the exploits of his ancestor Ryunosuke Naruhodo, beginning his adult life as a defense attorney. It must run in the family. The setting this time, however, is not good old Japan, which is the setting for most every Ace Attorney game, not some fictional city in the US. Instead, the story mostly takes place in Victorian-era London, a time when the courtroom system in Japan was still developing. Ryunosuke and his friends travel to London to learn more about modern law and pioneer a new era for Japanese law. If only it were that simple. Along the way, Ryunosuke meets a curious fellow, Herlock Sholmes. Yes, I kid you not, Herlock Sholmes, a famous British detective known around the world for his spine-chilling adventures and nearly accurate deductive reasoning. With the help of the eccentric sleuth, Ryunosuke and his friends attempt to solve a series of crimes, leading to a truth far greater than they could have ever imagined. Obviously, the story in these 2 games is the main centerpiece, and potentially the reason why you play, so I'm going to avoid revealing as many plot points as possible. But believe me when I say, Great Ace Attorney Chronicles is one of the greatest stories ever told in the series. I can almost guarantee the reveals in the later half will mesmerize you all the way to the end. That said, it does take some time for the plot to get that captivating. Nearly the entire first half is set up for the engrossing second half. But if you manage to get through the somewhat dull beginning, you're rewarded with a thrilling climax and satisfying conclusion. Part of what makes the first game, Great Ace Attorney Adventures, a slog is the overall easy difficulty. Answers for the court cases and investigations are shoved down your throat, making it nigh impossible to miss. Not that I want to get lost, but using my own big brain logic to solve these puzzles is one of the reasons I find enjoyment in the series. Stripping that mental satisfaction and force-feeding the answers not only bores me, it takes away the immersion. Granted, there is a balance to be had between blatantly obvious and ridiculously cryptic. It's hard to find that middle ground, but that is exactly what great games in this series achieve. The first game doesn't find that balance until the final chapter. The second, Great Ace Attorney Resolve, does it practically flawlessly. It's as if Capcom fleshed out every idea they had in the first game and saved their best writing and puzzles for the second, all to create an unforgettable conclusion. The well-written cast plays a huge role in helping the story achieve its great heights, grabbing the player's attention even when the gameplay and plot starts off lackluster, which goes to show how much a charming cast can save a story-based game. The main quartet, Ryunosuke, Susato, Sholmes, and Iris, have one of the best relationship dynamics I've seen in the series. Starting off as strangers, but blossoming into a lasting, wholesome friendship right before your eyes, almost becoming a family in a way. I particularly love Ryunosuke and Susato's relationship. Strangers at first, they slowly grow more comfortable with each other until they're flinging jokes and taking jabs like only close friends could ever do. I adore that character growth, and it makes the events of the story all the more bittersweet. It probably goes without saying, but I ship them really hard. I mean, really hard. That's my OTP. It's an Ace Attorney game. You have to ship somebody, or you're playing it wrong. Also, can I gush about Susato, the best girl in not just this game, but the entire Ace Attorney series? While comparable to Maya Fey, and she has a special place in my heart as well, Susato's role goes beyond moral support. She provides Ryunosuke legal advice and wisdom on multiple occasions, placing faith in her own abilities as well as Ryunosuke. Her presence adds a nice contrast to the typically misogynistic culture at that time period, without going overboard. She's strong, quick-witted, supportive, cute, funny, charming...
Whoa, take it easy. There's no need to simp.
Sorry, I got carried away. This whole time I've been ranting about the story, I haven't really mentioned the gameplay mechanics. Well, to put it briefly, it's good enough to keep me engaged. You'll find typical Ace Attorney cross-examinations, but with some added features, like noticing a witness's reaction, cross-examining the jury, or interacting with a piece of evidence, which is also where you'll find some of the game's funniest dialogue moments. The biggest addition, however, would have to be Herlock Sholmes' great deduction. True to character, Sholmes delights in quickly solving mysteries using his acute observation and fast deduction skills. Unfortunately, he has trouble arriving at accurate conclusions. That's where Ryunosuke and Susato step in to uncover the truth. Step by step, you'll observe the 3D environment, looking for clues the misguided detective overlooked. It changes up the usual 2D observation of the series, changing how you view a crime scene. Granted, it can be quite easy finding the real clues, but it's still fun to poke around and equally suspenseful depending on the case. Greetings, my Nipponese friends. You must be the law exchange student, Ryuji Narahara, and his assistant, Susano Mitama. Wow, that's amazing, Mr. Sholmes. How did you almost know our names? I have approximate knowledge of many things. For example, you will now ask me to sign your kimono. Will you sign my book? I'm a huge fan of... How did you know what I was almost thinking? Elementary, my dear Susato. Gesundheit. What brings you here, Mr. Sholmes? I'm delighted you asked. You see, I just finished solving my latest commission, the case of the missing pie. Through my powers of deductive reasoning, I have concluded that the pie was not eaten, but rather stolen. By who, you ask? Why, by none other than yourself, Mr. Narahara. Naruhodo desu. Whatever. Mr. Naruhodo! How dare you steal the pie? I knew it was only a matter of time before your stomach got the best of you. It's always the hungry ones, I'm afraid. What? How could I steal the pie? I just got here. A fair question, to which I have the perfect answer. You hired a troop of trained Russian squirrels to nab the pie right off the windowsill and straight to your stomach. Squirrels? Yes, squirrels. Your stunned silence is as good as a confession, my hungry friend. Mr. Sholmes, what if the squirrels took the pie for themselves? Ah, but would it not be more entertaining if Mr. Narahara was the mastermind behind it all? You have a point. That's really pathetic, Mr. Naruhodo. What? How could you believe him? His argument is entirely guesswork. Just because it's more entertaining doesn't make it true. Where's your proof that I hired squirrels to steal the apple pie? What? What's so funny? I never said what flavor of pie. Huh? You have walked straight into my trap, Naruhodo-san. Nani? Sonna? Sa, kokohaku seyo. そうすれば許してあげる。え？何言ってるの？僕何もしてないのに。なあ、スサトさん。信じてくれるんでしょ？あれ？その目で見ないでくれよ。違うんだろう。なあ、リスちゃん。僕リス語が喋れないから今言ってることわからないでしょ。ふざけんなよ。何にもしてないのにどうしてみんな信じてくれないの？なるほどくん、この茶番も終わりだ。いや、違うのよ。うざいなのにどうして信じてくれないの？ Oh, what's this? A pan with half-eaten apple pie inside. Looks like it fell off the windowsill behind the bush. Well, I never said Mr. Narahara was the only possibility, just the most entertaining one. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a date with the queen. Sorry for doubting you, Mr. Narahara, but did you really have to cry about it? My honor was being attacked! Hi. Okay, even I thought that was stupid. My Japanese pronunciation and accent is just terrible, but I tried. Maybe I'm losing my comedic touch.
Have you ever had one?
Debatable. Great Ace Attorney Chronicles is without a doubt one of the best games I've played this year. The first game, Adventures, is definitely one of the weakest games in the series, but Resolve is definitely one of the best, making the slow build-up worth it for the epic conclusion. If you're not a fan of the series, this one probably won't change your mind since the gameplay and structure overall doesn't change drastically, but I do recommend visual novel fans to give it a shot so they can experience this masterpiece in murder mystery storytelling. And now we come to my number one game of the year, a niche Nintendo series that returned after years of absence to well-deserved praise and fanfare from critics and fans alike. And no, it is not a visual novel. Probably not surprising to many, since this was Nintendo's biggest game of 2021, but Metroid Dread absolutely deserves to be Game of the Year. Developer Mercury Steam perfectly understands the Metroid series, and along with creator Yoshio Sakamoto, are not only replicating the Metroid formula, but building on the 2D action-adventure genre. Taking place after the events of Metroid Fusion, Dread sends Samus to the planet ZDR after signs that the deadly X-Parasite somehow still lives. Being the professional genocider that she is, the Galactic Federation hires Samus to take out the parasite once and for all. After landing on the planet, the bounty hunter waifu is jumped by an overwhelming power, trapping her deep below the planet and stripping her of most of her power. Again, you'd think Samus would be more prepared for situations like this since it happens so frequently. At least her new suit is cool. Of course, her mission then becomes escaping the dangerous giant space rock while searching for the X-Parasite and her mysterious attacker. It's a fun, wholesome adventure with little to no stress. Nothing anxiety-inducing at all. Get away from me, you robotic freak! Ah! As the name implies, dread is a common feeling you'll have when playing this one. Because while you're exploring the underground, nearly indestructible robot enemies called Emi are relentlessly attempting to delete you from existence. Or I guess it's more accurate to say they're trying to suck your DNA. Either way, it's terrifying. Samus is without a doubt helpless against these murder bots, leading to a deadly game of hide and seek until you find the firepower capable of defeating these overpowered monsters. To add more despair, the Emi increase in difficulty as you progress, acquiring new powers that turn your little game of hide and seek into a game of hide and get the heck out of there! Granted, there are only a handful of them to deal with, but each one, I swear, took a couple years of my life with them. Who knew something with such a cute name could cause so much trauma? Thankfully, the horror bots keep themselves restricted to specific areas in the game called Emi zones, meaning you don't have to worry about an Emi jumping you around every corner. Why they never leave their zones, I'm not sure. Probably something to do with the range of the machine controlling the robot, but whatever the reason, I am grateful for those moments of respite. As you traverse ZDR, blasting aliens and disposing of the Emi, you'll slowly regain Samus's powers, transitioning from weakling to a force of nature in a practically seamless progression. While there is indeed some backtracking, especially if you're going for 100%, the world naturally guides you to where you need to go next without making it too obvious. Sure, there were a couple times I felt a little lost, but thinking my way through those tough moments were equally as rewarding as they were tough. That fantastic progression is a testament to Mercury Steam's tight game design and one of the game's strongest features. That said, just because progression is seamless doesn't mean it's easy. Your run can go from 0 to 100 real quick if you're not careful. Metroid Dread will chew you up and suck your life force out unless you cautiously explore every room and carefully time your attacks. Efficiently mastering Samus's abilities is crucial to surviving, parrying attacks, dodging projectiles, and blasting enemy weaknesses. But even then, you might come across a new enemy that requires a new pattern to remember, killing you over and over until you nail it. In fact, Dread's difficulty boils down to memorizing patterns. Once you master when and how an enemy will attack, then you're able to conquer and move on. This is especially true with boss fights. How I adore the boss fights. They're so good. It's like fighting a living cinematic timed puzzle, where the timer is your health bar and the puzzles is figuring out the boss's attack pattern. These glorified meat sacks might seem daunting and impossible to fight at first, leading to multiple deaths, but once you understand the nuances of their fight, figuring out the best moments to attack, they're not impossible at all. In that way, it's incredibly rewarding to finally crack the code and send the monster packing. The boss fights also feature some of Samus's baddest moments, where she stares down horrifying creatures without even so much as flinching. Her body language speaks volumes to her character. Mercury Steams nails the tough, fearless bounty hunter personality that we don't get to see often. Remember how I said I value story greatly in my video games? Well, Dread is an example of telling the story through the environment, using the atmosphere and exploration to convey the story as you progress through the game. You don't necessarily need a long, elaborate plot to make a great narrative. Rather, effectively integrating story and gameplay into a seamless experience creates an equally lasting impression, one that you will remember years later. Dread absolutely nails that concept with awesome moment after awesome moment that keeps you engaged throughout your playthrough. I don't want to spoil anything specifically, but the final events of the game are probably some of my favorite moments in gaming. Absolutely exhilarating. Playing through the game just to see that ending is without a doubt worth it. If I had one minor complaint about Metroid Dread as a whole, I wish there were more giant bosses to fight. Yes, I know that's really greedy, but they were so much fun that I wouldn't have minded a couple more. That said, I know 2D Metroid games are mostly short experiences, and more bosses would have taken away from that, so I admire the choice to not overbloat the game. On that point, if you think Dread's short play time means it's not worth your money, I strongly suggest you reconsider. Sure, it's only about 10 hours if you take your time, but every minute is immersive and jam-packed with wondrous action exploration. The game also encourages you to play through it multiple times, adding some great replay value. I usually never replay games, New Game Plus or not, and even I play through it again in hard mode. It's that good! With masterful game design, epic boss battles, engaging exploration, surprising lore building, and strong replayability, Metroid Dread easily takes my pick for Nintendo 2021 Game of the Year. And that does it for my top 6 games of 2021. Overall, a blend of many genres, from visual novel to platformer to RPG. It was also a year full of sequels to long-running series, whether expected or out of the blue. I'd say this year was on par with 2020 in terms of my enjoyment. A couple of titles that greatly impressed me, but most were just pretty good, not series-defining. Although I'd argue a couple games on this could be considered that. Regardless, I'm pleased with my game library this year, and I'm glad I made time to play these wonderful titles. Looking toward 2022, however, you might as well rename it 2017, The Sequel, because it is gonna blow 2020 and 2021 out of the water. The sequel to Breath of the Wild is gonna happen. Legends Arceus, Kirby and the Forgotten Land, Triangle Strategy, Advance Wars Reboot Camp, Bayonetta 3, Splatoon 3, Mario & Rabbids Sparks of Hope, and that's just the titles we know of. What if we get a Fire Emblem remake and Xenoblade 3 announced this year? My hype would blast through the stratosphere! I cannot wait for what Nintendo has in store for this year. Then again, Nintendo could announce Super Mario NFT and ruin everything. Please don't let there be a Nintendo NFT, but my cynical side can easily see it. It would stand for Nintendo Fun Tokens. No, don't do it! Make the right choice, Nintendo! Thank you so much for watching! What did you think of my Game of the Year list? Agree? Disagree? Hate the sound of my voice? Feel free to let me know in the comments below. I'm super excited for 2022, as I think Nintendo will have a strong year. But maybe I'm overhyping it. Let me know if you think so. I can prepare myself for disappointment. Don't forget to subscribe so you can join me for the journey. Oh, by the way, I have my face reveal coming this month, so please look forward to that. Goodbye, you good people. And the nominees for Best Waifu of 2021 are Hinoa and Minato from Monster Hunter Rise, Chibi Cynthia from Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Susato from Great Ace Attorney Chronicles. Saori from Doki Doki Literature Club Plus. And Samus from Metroid Dread. Wait, I thought Metroid was a guy. Whatever. And the winner is...
モニガ